gentlemen, welcome everyone. Thank you for being here. It is the top of the hour, and you have made it to the right spot if you are looking for our signature climate advocate lobby training. I'm going to be hosting today, your host, Brett Cease, and we've got an empowering 90 minutes of training lined up for you ahead in our signature workshop. We're so glad that each of you have taken the time to join us today ahead of our 2024 fall conference. We'll put a link a few times in the chat where you can follow along with our slides at home. And I'll just note here at the top of the hour that any of the references that I'm talking about in the speaker notes are available for you later on. So that way you don't have to worry about tracking it down if you just click and open those slides at any point. So let's get started though. We are so glad that you're joining us. I'll be one of your two presenters here taking you through the first half of the workshop today. My name again is Brett Cease. I'm CCL's Vice President of Programs. I live up here in northern Minnesota in the wonderful community of Duluth, and I use he, him pronouns. I'll be joined a little bit later on by the wonderful John Sabin. John has served CCL as one of our Great Lakes Regional Directors since 2019. He became a CCL volunteer in 2016 and helped start the Lorain County, Ohio chapter just a few months into his journey with CCL. Outside of CCL, John has been a social worker since the 1990s, so you can also ask him more about that too. And our three learning goals, if we've done our job well in our hour and a half together ahead, are basically the following. Number one, we'll be exercising our political will building muscles by helping reconnect with what brought each of us to CCL, wanting to help Congress solve the climate crisis. We're going to be doing that through practicing storytelling. We'll have the chance to actually practice meeting with a mock member of Congress. I see some of our mentors are already here in the room with us. And maybe you lobbied before and can bring expertise to the table. Maybe lobbying is a new experience for you as of this coming week. Either way, we are here to build the political will for a stronger movement, and we are going to jump in and make sure to have that chance to grow our movement more powerfully and grow individually by having the chance to practice today and have that learning of basics of CCL's legislative asks as well. So along the way, we'll get educated and inspired and take some action. Let's jump right in. And the first thing that I've already prompted us in the chat, a few people I've seen have already done this. If you haven't yet, we'll put that in there again for you. We'd love for you to share a little bit more about your background. What brought you here today? Where are you calling in from? How long have you been involved with CCL? What drew you to our organization? Let's just take the time to get to know each other. And CCL is all about expanding our comfort zone. So if you haven't done that yet, we encourage you to put in the chat where you're at. We can read each other's chats, and we'd love to hear for you why you are part of our formational organization around the country helping build that political will for climate change. You can share with us whatever comes up for you while remembering that CCL is a nonpartisan organization with volunteers that identify at all parts of the political spectrum. So let's keep our comments and discussion grounded in our nonpartisan value as well. And let me read a few of these here. We got Jennifer calling in from Chicagoland, new member to the group, anxious to help climate change. Hassam is calling in from Ames, Iowa. Excellent. New to CCL, junior in high school. Hope to learn more about climate advocacy. We've got John calling in from Jacksonville, Florida as a climate migrant. He's now in Northampton, Massachusetts. We've got some Minnesotans. We've got Christina from John Sabin's Lorain County chapter in Ohio. This is great. We're drawn to CCL by their strategies, policy priorities. Excited to be here. This is just wonderful with over 230 of us on the line. I'm not going to be able to keep up, but I would encourage you, if you are looking for words of inspiration and that sense of being a part of a larger movement, just go through the chat right now. Look at all of the different attendees. I know looking around the room, we've got several watch parties even. I know my friend Carol in Missouri is joining us from a library in the St. Louis area and a whole bunch of other people. I see Bainbridge as well for a watch party. Thank you all so much for being here, and let's learn from each other today. All right, so thank you for setting us up for that first step of storytelling. What we're actually going to do next is basically take in an activity that has been a part of every climate advocate training really since the very beginning of this workshop over a dozen years ago. And what we like to call this is a save versus saver activity. And it starts with a quote from the beloved American author, E.B. White. So that's the setup. Here's the quote. In 1969, E.B. White gave an interview with the New York Times, and in that interview, he shared his reflections. If the world were merely seductive, he noted, that would be easy. If it were merely challenging, that would be no problem. But I arise in the morning, torn between a desire to improve or save the world, and a desire to enjoy or savor the world. This makes it hard to plan the day. And we in CCL like to add, but if we forget to savor the world, what possible reason do we have for saving it? In a way, the savoring must come first. And let me repeat that last part. If we forget to savor the world, what possible reason do we have for saving it? So, what I'd like everyone to do is really just take this moment, wherever you're tuning in from. It's the morning of Saturday. You are here at a climate advocacy workshop online. And I'd like you just to think about for yourself, what is it that you savor, that you want to be around for the next generation? Put another way, what place or tradition or relationship that you hold dearly lights you up, grounds you in that sense of importance of our shared work for building the political will for climate change policy in a livable world? And we're going to put that into practice in just a little bit. But first, I'm going to model what this looks like on my end. And then we're actually going to jump into some breakout rooms in a bit. And so here is my perspective. One of the places that strikes that savoring, nurturing place for me is the beloved Boundary Waters canoe area in northern Minnesota. That's me paddling in the morning mist. And if you can imagine, if you haven't been there yet, since a young boy, this place has always had a magical energy for me due to its remote, pristine wilderness setting, offering a unique combination of interconnected lakes, pristine waterways, lush forests, abundant wildlife with iconic species like moose and loons extending nearly 150 miles across that international boundary between Canada and Minnesota. And it's also an unparalleled opportunity to have solitude while paddling and forging through 1 million acres of wilderness. And even this reverent place is not beyond the impacts of climate change, right? One of my first CCL conferences was a regional conference here in Minnesota where we heard from the lead forestry researcher from the University of Minnesota, Dr. Lee Freelick, highlight the impact that climate change was already and would have within my lifetime to these woods. And we can put a link to a study here in the paper within the notes. But basically, this research continues to highlight there's a high likelihood of this kind of forest disappearing and basically migrating further north with our warming climate, even within my lifetime with business as usual scenario emissions. And given that, that was really my wake up call where I realized something that I savored that was so important to me and formational in my identity was under threat. And it required me to take action and engage in making sure that this was something that future generations could also enjoy and be profoundly shaped by like I was. So thank you for letting me share what I savor with you. And now we're going to have that same opportunity for each of you to do the same in partner groups. You're going to be placed in a 5-minute breakout room. It'll automatically happen in about half a minute here. 3 people per room. You'll each get a minute to speak and think about what it is for you that you savor, that you want to make sure is around for future generations. You can share your name, something you savor, and we encourage you to be descriptive, right? Paint a picture with your words. Share specific details about what it is that you love and help make us love it too. You'll each have about a minute again to share and then a minute warning before we bring you back to the main room. And we'll say that the person living closest to the boundary waters in northern Minnesota goes first in your breakout. If you need any help, you can just click the raise your hand icon. And with that, we'll see you back here in 5 minutes, everyone. Thanks so much. All right, so with that though, let's transition. We have zoomed into the micro, the very heart of what makes your climate advocacy tick for you personally and why you care. And now what I'd like us to be invited to do is step back actually and zoom out to a much larger macro scale. When CCL's founder, Marshall Saunders, was just starting CCL in our organization, he attended church one Sunday and heard a sermon that really inspired him. And he shared a piece of that sermon in the very first climate advocate training that he led back in 2007. It's been a part of our training ever since. And the story is about Apollo astronaut Rusty Schweickart. So I'm going to read that excerpt for you today to have Marshall be with us as well, but also because I still find it incredibly meaningful. Sometimes something occurs in our lives that shifts our perspective, right? That gives us a greater appreciation for the things that we savor. And that shift occurred during Apollo 9 when Rusty Schweickart was let out of the capsule on an umbilical cord. Usually, NASA keeps the astronauts compulsively busy up there, but a peculiar thing happened to Rusty in space. Just as he emerged from the capsule, something went wrong within the capsule. And as a result, both Mission Control in Houston and the remaining astronauts had to concentrate on the problem. This left Rusty all alone, floating around Mother Earth in complete and cosmic silence. During this time, Rusty had two profound conversion experiences he wrote about later, reflecting. He looked back on Mother Earth and saw a shining gem against a totally black backdrop, realizing that everything he cherished was on that gem. His family and land, music and human history with all of its folly and grandeur. He was so overcome that he wanted to hug and kiss that gem like a mother does her firstborn child. Compassion flowed through Rusty. Trained as a jet fighter pilot, he was a typical macho man. But a breakthrough in that moment of something bigger came washing over him in that moment in space. And his second awakening was a political one. As a red, white, and blue American who believed what he had always been taught, that the world was divided between the communist world and the free world, Rusty, while floating around Earth, saw that rivers flowed indiscriminately between Russia and Europe, that ocean currents served communist, socialist, and capitalist nations alike, that clouds did not stop at borders to test for political ideology. Nations, and that there were no nations. Nations exist in the mind of the human race alone. And on returning to NASA, Schweikart was not debriefed by any spiritual director about his mystical experiences. He confesses to having wandered around in a state of stupor for 6 months, bumping into walls while asking himself repeatedly this one question: why did God do this to me? Finally, he concluded that this happened so that others might hear the message. But what message is that? That of compassion, of interdependence, of shared beauty on this shining and glistening planet. This holy earth, it must take such care of us. This side of heaven, we are each of us nearly all the other has. Now, I remember hearing about this story of Rusty Schweikart in my first climate advocate training workshop that I hosted back in 2011 in the sustainability office of Bemidji State University, surrounded by 30 of my friends and fellow community members. CCL's executive director, Mark Reynolds, had flown out from Southern California to lead the workshop. And after that launch, I tabled at community events, farmers markets, got to know people and write letters to Congress. And as they joined our chapter, we wrote letters to the editor, met with the editorial board, convinced them to print articles, encouraged Congress to lead. And that June, I actually jumped on a bus, went across the country to our nation's capital to attend my first conference and lobby day in Washington, D.C. That's me here in the middle as a fresh 25-year-old, almost 14 years ago. And I always will remember that sense of community that I connected to during my first CCL conference. That loss of isolation, the disappearance of despair that I felt around the challenges that we faced with the crisis ahead of us with climate change. As I made new friends that I still have around the country, many of you are on the line here today as our mock members of Congress, and had the most profound, almost spiritual experience of lobbying. I can remember reflecting back on the, sitting on the cold marble floors in the halls of Congress at the end of that first long day of lobbying, my mind and body full of the lobby day experience, and the words from that workshop and from Rusty still echoing in my head, being not debriefed about this mystical experience, confessing to wandering around in a state of stupor for 6 months, bumping into walls, asking myself this question: why did this happen? Well, that was me, right? And that was any of us that have had these profound experiences, being able to kind of make that connection, realize our own personal involvement can make a profound difference within that larger climate community. And it took me quite a while, though, to completely understand the power of that profound experience. And after you complete our workshop today and jump into the rest of the conference, we hope that you, with this training, will have that same eye-opening experience to join your CCL lobby team next week. You deserve that transformational, wall-bumping, soul-searching experience that Rusty had, that we've all had in lobbying Congress. And that really is at the heart of what CCL does, right? So as an organization, we have a two-part mission. We are here, number one, to create the political will for a livable world. We know that politicians don't create political will. They respond to it. And therefore, it's our job to create the political will to solve climate change. Every time I'm tempted to give up on our politicians, I remind myself that it's the job of their constituents, including me, to motivate them. And that's why we focus on Congress a lot in CCL, because when Congress acts, it exerts huge leverage on the entire country and the entire world. And climate change, as we know, is a global issue. And we also work obviously in our community and our local governments because in addition to the local gains we can make, our national politicians keep a close eye on what's happening in their district or states as part of their constant evaluation of political will. So that work trickles up from our community on up to Congress. And I also want to acknowledge this today, right? Many people across the political perspective, wherever you might be, are deeply discouraged about the state of our government and our politics right now. Beyond disgusted was one of the recent headlines I read in a newspaper story about the dysfunctionality of Congress. And I think that personally, it's really just important to name that this is a big, hard thing that we're asking you and all CCL volunteers to do in focusing on Congress to get it to do its job. I do ask myself at times if I'm crazy, I think we can make a difference, but I decide to always keep going because we know from our lobby meetings with members of Congress and their staff that there are many good people working in our government who want to make a difference and who find it very hard to keep working in this system. And we are so glad that those thoughtful people stay in our government. And when we meet with them, we model what it is to be a good member of our democracy. We're respectful, we listen, we're engaged, and look for common ground. As the old saying goes, we are being the change we want to see in our democracy. And I think that's really the key part of our second mission. So with that, building political will of the livable world, we are focused on achieving that through allowing all of us to experience personal and political breakthroughs and exercising our power. Again, that power happens when we move outside of our comfort zone. We like to say that outside of your comfort zone is where the magic happens. And so, who is up for me to move outside of your comfort zone and make some magic happen in Congress with our lobby week next week? I love it. Feel free to give me a round of applause wherever you're coming in. And let's transition to another story here. And this one comes by way of Gandhi's autobiography. When I first joined CCL, I heard the story of Gandhi and General Smuts in South Africa. I think that this is a perfect example of one stepping outside of one's comfort zone. You might know about Mahatma Gandhi's efforts to end British colonial rule in India, but before that, Gandhi was actually a young lawyer who fought for the rights of Indians in South Africa. And I like to imagine Gandhi at home with his wife, maybe both writing letters to India in the dark evenings by lantern light. And I imagine that was in Gandhi's comfort zone. But in order to actually secure more civil rights for Indians, Gandhi knew that he'd need to come toe to toe with the head of the Transvaal government, a gentleman on the right there by the name of General Jan Smuts. And so he addressed that head on, actually requesting and securing a meeting with General Smuts. And in his biography, Gandhi writes there's a telling of their first meeting that goes something like this. Imagine Gandhi walking into that meeting, a short man, 5 foot tall. In contrast, General Smuts towering above him at over 6 feet, dressed head to toe in full military regalia, with medals of honor and rank adorning his chest. And Gandhi walks right up, looks the general in the eye, and quietly announced, I'm come to tell you that I'm going to fight against your government. Looking down and laughing, Smuts replied, Oh, really? Do you have anything else to tell me? To which Gandhi replied, Yes, I intend to prevail. Somewhat taken aback, General Smuts asked, retorting, How are you going to do that? And without missing a beat, Gandhi said 3 simple words that frame this whole story. With your help. With your help. Ultimately, Gandhi's work won the general's respect and friendship. In 1914, South Africa actually repealed those most offensive laws to Indians and voted basic civil rights into law, and the two actually became friends in old age. Gandhi had courage and determination. He had refused to take undue advantage of his adversaries, and he had an endless capacity to stick it out. We share those values and seek to foster the characteristics within ourselves that help build these relationships to solve problems and find common ground. And this story about Gandhi and Smuts speaks to our theory of power. Sadly, there are many people these days who work by appealing to the worst parts of human nature and hope to force their will on everyone else. But generally, those changes lead to backlash, and I believe people are ready for that chance to show they want something differently. Alternatively, we work persistently by appealing to the best parts of human nature, by building relationships, seeking common ground, and bringing forth good and creative solutions to our problems. It's sometimes described as being nice, but really it's not niceness that we're after. It's that long lasting change that happens one relationship at a time by changing hearts and minds, and it's hard and worthy work. So, with that, let's set up a little bit of review because I'm guessing that many of you on the call have already attended our info session. We'd love to hear what you think about it in the chat. We offer the info session every week on Wednesday evenings. Please invite friends and family who may be interested in CCL to check us out at this link for our weekly informational session. And if you're not yet connected or haven't attended yourself, you can also register or find a recording of that at your own time. We're not going to be reviewing what's covered on the info session tonight because we obviously want to keep a tight focus 90 minutes. But on that info session, what we talk about is a brief review of what we call our 5 levers of political will, how we organize in communities across the country. You can see CCL chapters across this map focusing on leveraging our teams within our local chapters to build political will with lobbying Congress, media relations, grassroots outreach, grass tops engagement, and chapter and volunteer development. And we describe the various activities involved with each of these levers, right? With lobby meetings, writing Congress, how to write a letter to the editor, tabling, you name it. If you're not yet engaged with your chapter level, we also would love for you to email membership. Kathy's dropped a link to that in the chat. We'd love to help you connect with your local group. And we aren't going to do more of that today, given that that's really the focus of the info session. The other 2 things that we cover on the info session are a wonderful overview of CCL's core values that guide all of the work that we do, that help us provide a home base for all of our volunteers and the decisions that we make because we trust you in your local communities to do what's right within our core values. And these include focus, integrity, optimism, diversity, being nonpartisan, relationships, and the chance to have personal power. And the last thing that we touch base on the info session, just as a brief touch point to review today, is CCL's policy agenda, right? So we review CCL's policy agenda, which includes all of the different activities that we do across different focus areas to reduce net emissions while building bridges in both Congress and our communities. We're going to focus on one of these today with our primary ask shortly, but no, overall, we're focused on our signature or flagship policy that we've been known our entire organization's history, carbon pricing. We're also focused on healthy forests, building electrification efficiency, and clean energy permitting reform. All right, so look at that. We're half an hour into our workshop, and in 20 minutes, we'll actually jump into our breakout rooms with our mock members of Congress. For this 20 minutes ahead, what I'd like to do is 2 things. I'd like to set us up with a brief overview of our primary ask, and then I'm actually going to pass it to John to walk through what an actual meeting looks like with your member of Congress. John will review some of the roles that you can take on and what that actual beginning, middle, and end feels like. All right, so with that though, let's jump in specifically to talking about our one rule. We don't have a lot of rules as an organization. In fact, we trust you implicitly to show up as a CCLer in alignment with our shared values, following CCL's model and exploring our theory of power to do what is best in your community with that guidance. We do, however, ask that when you meet with your member of Congress, you find something that you can respect, admire, and appreciate about them, and let them know about that as the grounding of your meeting. And so what I'd like to do in the chat right now when we talk about our one rule here is actually invite all of you to think about this. We've all got 2 senators and 1 representative. You can share about one of them in the chat, and Kathy's going to pull a link where you can find a link to your representative in the bio of who that is if you need help remembering who that might be for you and where you're calling in from. But please do share what one thing about your member of Congress you respect, admire, or appreciation, right? Or you appreciate about them. If you find that impossible to do, that's okay too. But what I'd like to say is that for some of us, coming to that perspective of respect might be too difficult. And if that's your case, then we invite you to do other tasks in your chapter finding other roles within your group, and simply bow out of the lobby meetings, because this really is the one rule that we have for anyone that's engaged with lobbying Congress. And I'm going to share a story briefly about how this impacts our lobby meetings. About a decade ago, a group of CCLers had a meeting scheduled with their member of Congress in DC. We call that a face-to-face meeting, when they actually get to meet with a member of Congress rather than the staff. So these volunteers had their face-to-face meetings scheduled. They thought about what they could respect, admire, and appreciation about their member of Congress. Most of the volunteers were from, the particular community, and they weren't sure how this was going to go, but they arrived at the member's office in the congressional office building. The receptionist greeted them. An aide brought them into the crowded office, and then they were told that the aide would be filling in. The member of Congress is not available to meet with them. Undeterred, the CCLers decided to share their appreciation for the member of Congress, to start that meeting anyways, and asked the aide to relay their gratitude. They proceeded to mention his work on river restoration. All of a sudden, behind one of the office cubicles came a booming voice. "I was proud of that work I did to restore the river." And out walked the member of Congress, sheet high and arm reaching to shake out their hands. He'd been hiding behind those short cubicle walls, maybe fearing, for a group of environmentalists to come in and tell him the riot act about their disappointment about his policies. And instead, he engaged because of this orientation, was pleasantly surprised by our volunteers and their gratitude. And I'll just share this, right? For me, at least, in addition to disarming our in addition to disarming our elected officials, starting with gratitude helps us see the best in them. Personally, it helps me take that chip off of my shoulder. If I'm going to ask my member of Congress to lead, I need to believe that they can. And so that is what we're sharing in the chat. Please continue to feel free to do that in being able to name what stands out to you. And thank you so
Mhm,
much for taking that on. You can put that in the chat.
mhm,
There we go. All right, what we're going to do next is transition to talking a little bit more about our primary ask. All right, so Kathy's going to put a link in the chat where you can find more. But basically, let's talk about our primary asks. We are going to walk you through this handout, which your lobby team is going to be using in your lobby meetings. In our lobby meetings, we limit the amount of material we give to the member of Congress or their staff members. In fact, we encourage you to avoid giving them any other material beyond this primary ask and any evidence of support for policies on climate from the district, because this is really the essential nature, the primary focus of what we want to discuss, as the name suggests. You also want to leave this behind if you're meeting in person. Online, your lobby lead has probably already emailed this or will follow up with the office afterwards. So let's go over this primary ask. And for the fall lobby week, we actually have two asks that we're asking congressional offices. Half of offices, if you're meeting with Republicans, are going to be talking about the second one, defending the Climate Provision Act, provisions within the Inflation Reduction Act. But for the sake of time, focus, and simplicity today, we're only going to be briefly discussing the Energy Permitting Reform Act, and that's what we're going to be asking for you in your mock lobby meetings shortly to also be focusing on, since this applies to all offices, House and Senate, Democrat and Republican offices. So, in a nutshell, at the very top line, what you should know about our primary ask is that this bill, the Energy Permitting Reform Act, or known as EPRA for short, is something that we're asking leadership to act on before the end of this Congress, known as the lame duck. What's in the bill? Well, that one pager highlights a lot of these bullets, but this bill accelerates transmission permitting, especially helping build out our clean energy infrastructure around the country. It helps get more clean energy on federal lands. It provides judicial review for provisions that shorten statute of limitations and help accelerate how we can build out more clean energy throughout this country. It also makes domestic mining more feasible. It has more oil and gas and renewable lease sales in it, and it expedites LNG export terminal permits. This, again, is because of this bill being crafted from both Republican and Democratic interests. And what I'd like to do is just highlight, we won't have time to go into this today. We have a wonderful training that Kathy will drop a link in the chat. But even in the most conservative modeling, what other independent studies, really the dream team of climate modelers have done, outfits like Resources for the Future, Princeton's Zero Lab, RMI, formerly known as Rocky Mountain Institute, have shown is that even in the most conservative modeling scenarios, this bill helps reduce emissions and has the chance to reduce our climate emissions domestically by the end of 2050, up to 25%. So that's a big chunk out of the emissions reductions that we're looking for as a country, and that's why we have it as our primary ask. Again, if you're looking for more training outside of today, you can check out the link in the chat to our Energy Permitting Reform Act of 2024 frequently asked questions, hosted by Dana Nuccitelli, CCL's research coordinator. And again, just as kind of a little reminder of how we're going to get there, we know that there's a bipartisan path for the Energy Permitting Reform Act. Both sides have reasons that they want to advance the bill. Democrats get the chance to have permitting reform to build clean energy faster, have the chance to make that transmission build out much more smoothly. Republicans get the chance to benefit permitting reform, having that accelerated build out, as well as longer supported and clarity around leasing and LNG provisions. So if you're meeting with a Democratic office, you might be saying, well, how do I frame this ask in a way that's with their focus and language? Here's a couple of top line messages, because we actually have a primary ask for Democratic offices and a primary ask sheet for Republican offices. The Democratic office sheet highlights the importance of centering renewable energy, right? Renewable energy stands to benefit greatly from permitting reform. In Dana Nuccitelli's words, we are trying with policies like this to bury fossil fuels under an avalanche of clean energy. And we know that one of the best ways to do that is to actually help build it faster, right? We can't, right now, there's bottlenecks across all of our different transmission queues. We need to find ways to make it more efficient, to build more clean energy faster, and we're not going to be able to hit our climate goals without that transmission expansion. So that's why we're asking Democrats to engage with leadership to use all means to move this bill ahead in the rest of our remaining congressional time frame this year. On the Republican side of the aisle, what we're focusing on is, again, the importance of energy infrastructure, making it easier to build faster. We want to make sure to tie that with the importance of, if we build out this, it's going to help lower costs and improve reliability. Those are two key points that we know a lot of conservative offices value and emphasize in their own talking points. And we can't do that without being able to kind of use regular order on a bipartisan basis. There isn't a chance to use permitting reform through reconciliation or it was executive action alone. If you're in a Republican office and they say, well, we just want to wait till next year when we have full control of both House and Senate and the White House. This is going to require bipartisan support. And that's why it's so key for us to use the leadership we have now in the remaining time in Congress. So in summary, again, this bill has compromises and wins for the climate community. It's an opportunity for us to get an important climate win. We can't let the enemy be the perfect of the good, and that's really our main focus for your lobby meeting asks. So I know, I'm guessing that some of you have questions. I'm guessing that maybe all of you have questions. And the great news is that in 10 minutes, you're going to have ample time in your smaller groups. There's over 300 of us on this main line, so we're not going to be able to get to everyone on the main line. But after John, my co-host today, walks through how we're going to run your breakout rooms, we'll start those rooms with Q&A time with your mentor and a longtime CCL leader that can help you walk through all that we've just discussed. So with that, actually, I'm going to pass it to you, John, to take us through these 10 minutes ahead of us jumping into our breakout in our sample lobby meeting, our practice with our mock member of Congress.
Excuse me, Brett. My name is Tova, and I missed the top line messages for the Dems, and I'm wondering.
Yeah, Tova, everyone else, if you have questions, you can put them in the chat because we're tight on time. So I'm not going to be able to take verbal questions right now. But John, please go for it.
All right. Thank you, Brett. So let's take a look at what a lobby meeting looks like. Brett, can you show us that video of a mock lobby meeting?
I'd love to. And this is condensed for time, but it might feature somebody that you recognize.
John, we really appreciate your meeting with us today. And thank you. Please thank the Congresswoman for her support of the Growing Climate Solutions Act. Your voice really matters to us. We really want to hear what you have to say on climate.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that. And I'll be sure to share your kind words with the Congresswoman.
Thank you for taking that back to the Congresswoman. And we were hoping today to talk about the carbon border adjustment mechanisms and also to figure out how we can help you with your goals. And to do that, we wanted to know, how do you think we could best approach our common goals of protecting the environment and our children?
Well, I think the Congresswoman would say that the best way to protect our kids is to keep the economy strong and make sure their parents have good jobs.
Brett, we can't hear anything.
Yes,
Are
it
we supposed to
sounds
be
to
hearing
me like
something?
you're
Most people
concerned about
can. Yep.
jobs
Oh,
and the
Yep.
economy. At the same time, the
Thanks.
Congresswoman has said that she's concerned about competition with China.
Oh yeah, she's very concerned about that.
I think maybe something we could both support could create a trade benefit for U.S. companies. Bills that have a carbon border adjustment mechanism give a trade advantage to U.S. companies because U.S. manufacturers are innovative and already use cleaner manufacturing processes. It would enable us to have more manufacturing jobs over here in the United States. Would the Congresswoman be interested in supporting such a bill?
Well, I'm sure she'd be willing to take a look at that. If you could send over some more information, I'd be happy to pass it on.
We can definitely make that happen. We'll get you that information soon. Thank you, John.
Well, thank you. It's good to see you all.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, Brett. So our CCLers in the video, Beth, Lisa, and Arlene, demonstrated some effective communication techniques in meeting with whoever that guy was who was playing the congressional staffer. Beth started by affirming the staff member, thanking them for passing previous information along to the member of Congress. The volunteers had done their research. They knew what concerns the member of Congress had and kept those in mind during the meeting. They asked open-ended questions, allowing the staffer to give answers more revealing than a simple yes or no. The team reflected back to the staff what they heard him say. They found common ground and connected the concerns of the member of Congress with the particular solution they wanted to pitch. And they ended the meeting with a promise to follow up with additional information that the staffer wanted. This allows for the relationship to continue. So we encourage you to research your member of Congress, find out what they consider to be their accomplishments, learn what annoys them so that you can avoid that topic. Investigate local impacts of climate change. Learn how the policy you're advocating for will impact your district or state. And review previous CCL meeting minutes, which you can access via the liaison. Before you go into your meeting, figure out who is going to send a thank you note after the meeting. If you are meeting in person during our summer lobby day, one volunteer can bring a blank thank you note that your team can sign promptly after the meeting ends. If you're meeting virtually, as you will be next week, someone can create a virtual thank you note for everyone to sign. Now, CCL has identified 8 different roles in a lobby meeting. Depending on the size of your lobby team, an individual may fill multiple roles. Those roles are the meeting lead, the appreciator, the time monitor, the note taker, the asker, the deliverer, follow-up, and tech support. And we will put those in the chat for you. Now, you can think about the meeting lead as like a conductor. They're there to manage the meeting, not to dominate it. They don't talk the most. They empower others to share and participate. They'll keep the conversation on track and wrap up when appropriate. The appreciator shares what they respect, admire, and appreciate about the member of Congress, helping to set a positive example and tone for the meeting. Someone will keep the meeting on time. They also monitor the percent of time CCLers and the member of Congress or staff talk with a target of a 50-50 split. And they tally the number of open-ended questions our team asks for the meeting minutes. We look for an experienced volunteer to take notes or the meeting minutes. They follow the thread of the conversation, especially capturing what's said by the member of Congress or the staffer. If you don't ask for something, you won't get anything. So one volunteer assumes the role of asker. They present CCL's purpose and ask. If possible, this is someone who has a strong grasp of our policy and its wider implications. The asker leaves behind a handout describing the ask, or for virtual meetings, those handouts can be emailed to the staffer. Now, remember all those letters to the editor that you and your chapter have gotten printed in the past 6 months. Someone on the team can deliver those letters to the editor along with any endorsements you've gotten from local respected leaders. Now you've planned your follow-up in advance, so this team member sends follow-up meeting materials and a thank you card. If the person doing the follow-up is not the liaison, they should coordinate on the follow-up items with the liaison soon after the meeting. And if you're meeting on Zoom, be sure to have someone who feels comfortable providing tech support. We invite everyone to speak in the meeting while keeping in mind that constituents and trusted messengers will likely be the most meaningful to the member of Congress. Now, a good meeting is like a story. It has a beginning, middle, and end. In the beginning, we offer thanks, we ask how much time they have for us, we introduce ourselves, share our appreciation, and state our purpose and mention our ask. In the middle, we exchange thoughts, we listen, we ask open-ended questions, and we aim to move them forward in action. At the end, we return to our ask unless they have already indicated they won't help, in which case we propose a supporting ask, which is less of a stretch for them. We clarify any questions and indicate our follow-up. We will put this all in the chat for you as we go through another review here. So let's review all of this one more time. First, we thank the member or staffer for meeting with us. Then the timekeeper confirms the amount of time they have for the meeting. We introduce ourselves briefly. If you're meeting with a staffer for the first time, ask them to tell us a little bit about themselves. Next, we express appreciation for something that they've done recently. It doesn't have to be about climate or the environment. Someone that explains our purpose to create the political will for a livable world. And we briefly state our request. Let them know that you will circle back to our ask at the end of the meeting, but first we want to hear their concerns and their thoughts. Then moving into the middle of the meeting, we ask open-ended questions that invite them to share their thoughts related to the primary ask. If you sense or anticipate resistance, you might ask questions like, what might be preventing the congressperson from supporting our legislation? Or, who in our district would we need to convince about the merits of this proposal to win your support? Or what's your preferred plan to lower emissions? Having done your research, you will probably be able to anticipate what you think their responses might be. After a lot of listening, towards the end of the meeting, you make the ask. Or if they've indicated that they are not ready to introduce or support our policy, then introduce a secondary request as a building block. Allow them time to respond to the ask. You can then offer additional materials, ask if they would like them hard copy or electronic, and ask how and when to follow up. You can always ask who they work with on the other side of the aisle, and thank them for their time as you end the meeting promptly on time. Your timekeeper should be giving the meeting lead a heads up about 5 minutes before the end of the meeting. Now, we've got some CCL leaders who are just now joining this call. These CCL veterans will be joining us in breakout rooms for the next 35 minutes, where you will get a chance to practice a lobby meeting in a team. They've been asked to put MOC in front of their names to help us identify them as we get the breakout room set up. And now let's review how our next 35 minutes together will go. First, when you get to your assigned breakout rooms in just a bit, we've asked them to spend 5 minutes answering any questions you may have. Then you'll have 10 minutes to organize yourselves for the mock lobby meeting, delegate roles, and review your meeting agenda. Once you are prepared, you will have 10 minutes for your mock lobby meeting. Your CCL veteran will play the role of your member of Congress, and you will work as a team to lobby them. Then they will lead you through a debrief of the experience. To review, you'll have 35 minutes together. You'll give yourselves 5 minutes for the Q&A, 10 minutes to prepare, 10 minutes to have a practice lobby meeting, and then 10 minutes for a debrief. Brett, are the breakout rooms ready?
I believe they are. So if it takes a little bit to find it, that's entirely all right. but we should have the fullness of time here. And so if you have any questions in just a moment, you should be able to see your breakouts, and we'll make sure that your member of Congress knows that you are looking forward to having them join you and be able to jump in and have your questions answered there. So the breakout rooms automatically close in 35 minutes. We'll give you a little signal every 10 minutes throughout. And if you need any help, you can raise your hand and Allison and I can jump in your room with you. But we've got all 35 rooms set up. Thanks, everyone. Wow, how did we do? How did we do, everyone? We had over 300 of us across 40 Zoom lines. I'd call that a pretty big success. Congratulations, everyone, on jumping right in. I'm going to mute all lines just so they don't hear any dogs barking in the background. But before anything else, just a huge round of applause to all of our mock members of Congress. I hope that you felt in your team that they channeled your member of Congress in meeting the way that you were expecting. I'm so grateful for all of our leaders. Thank you so much, each of you that jumped in to be a mentor and be a part of your team's experience in helping get set up for success for Lobby Weeks. We couldn't do this without you. So just again, join me in a huge round of applause for our mock MOCs and all of the work that they did. And then most importantly, thank each of you, right? We had a wonderful chance to really get those butterflies out of your stomach and see that in action, this really is pretty basic and something that each of you can succeed in. And so for the sake of this workshop today, if you have any reflections in the chat, I'd love for you to see them or put those in so we can see them for each other. I'd also love to just welcome everyone to a poll. It's a simple 1 through 5 question. How did we do on today's workshop? Feel free to put your response. You can honor wherever you're at in that. We'd love to know what you liked or didn't like in that poll. And you can also email us afterwards. I'll put my email. I know that you've got it from the Zoom invite in the chat as well. But feel free to follow up and give us any constructive feedback on how we can make this even better. But with that, we are at time. We actually got 1 minute left. So what I'd love to just do is just close by saying, I hope that you now no longer feel alone in your urge to solve the climate crisis. In fact, according to Yale, the overwhelming majority of Americans are in these 3 categories, right? Alarmed, concerned, and cautious. You are part of a broad coalition of 3/4 of our country who are in this category and are helping make difference, but you're part of a very special slice that Yale emphasizes within the overall advocacy community of people that are engaged in actually doing something about it. So thank you. We also want to say that you are officially ready now to join your lobby team meeting. This is the official end of our climate advocate lobby training. As a citizen lobbyist, we hope that you found today's training useful and empowering, and we thank you for your feedback. While you're completing this form, reflecting on this morning's lessons, know that we wish you all of the best in your lobby meetings this next week ahead. Please do reach out to me or membership. We'll put membership's email in the chat. If you have any questions, you can also ask in our forums. And now what we're going to do is actually take a little break before the next half hour when we begin the actual conference. And so if you have any questions about the rest of the conference lineup today, all you have to do is go to where we're highlighting here, cclusa.org/fall conference. That will have the overall agenda. You'll be able to click from that page on any of the specific Zoom lines. Most of the conference today is on one main Zoom line, but we'll get started in half an hour. We are so grateful for all that each of you have done to help make our success for Lobby Weeks possible next week. And at this point, again, thank you all so much for being here today. I'm going to unmute all lines for a minute before we jump off, and have a wonderful rest of your day, everyone. Take care.
Thanks, Brent.
It was wonderful.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Everybody.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Citizens Climate Lobby's training program. You can tune into more episodes anywhere podcasts are available. Inspired by what you heard today? Join Citizens Climate Lobby to advocate for bipartisan climate solutions. Go to community.citizensclimate.org to find more trainings, resources, your local chapter, national action teams, discussion forums, and more. Be sure to like our Facebook page and follow us on Twitter and Instagram @CitizensClimate. We also invite all of our listeners to subscribe to our YouTube channel for more inspiration.
Like what you hear? Recommend us to your friends and make sure to give us a 5-star rating. It helps us show up on other listeners' feeds. Feel free to pass on any suggestions for future episodes in the comments as well.
And together, we are creating the political will for a livable world.